The 1940s were a rough decade for the human race. The first half of it was a planetary war, and the second half was cleaning up the mess. It was a decade when many things changed. Politics, society, music, food, and the role of women in the workplace all went through a rapid evolution. Cinema in the 1940s couldn't help but evolve. Movies developed a darker, more nuanced view of the world. In the US, the Hays Code imposed infantilizing censorship on films, but even this couldn't stop movie makers from producing some of the most chilling villains of cinema history. So here are my favourite movie villains in 1940s cinema. Let me know in the comments who your favourite 40s villains were. So here we go. Spoilers from this point forward. Only hardcore movie buffs remember an actor called Laird Cregar, which is a great shame. He was tall, overweight, immensely talented, and he had great range as an actor. From the flamboyant bullfighting fan Natalio Curio in Blood and Sand, to Captain Henry Morgan in The Black Swan, to playing the devil himself in Heaven Can Wait. Cregar was the most valuable player in any movie he acted in. In Hangover Square, his last film, he played a classical music composer called George Harvey Bone, who suffered from blackouts when stressed. Loud or discordant sound triggered fugues in Bone, where he became murderously violent. He would wake up in unfamiliar parts of London and discover that murders had taken place in those areas during the blackouts. Bone meets and falls in love with a vain and greedy music hall singer, Netta Longden, played by Linda Darnell. Netta wants George to write popular music for her act, which he does. Things do not end well. So why is George Harvey Bone on the list? Because he's a sympathetic monster in spite of the fact that we see him killing a shop owner at the very start of the film. He doesn't murder because he likes it or gets any advantage from doing it. He murders because of a mental illness brought on by stress. This psychologically complex explanation for his crimes makes Bone more understandable and sympathetic to an audience. He also gets a really mad death scene. Harry Lime is the perfect narcissistic villain, a black marketeer in post-war Vienna. He adulterated penicillin to increase his profit margins. He was a charismatic sociopath. Harry faked his own death to keep the Allied military authorities off his back. He knows he's the smartest man in the room, any room. Like many criminals, he is flawed because he thinks everybody is either a sucker or just as corrupt as he is. What Harry doesn't factor in is the bumbling naivete of his old friend Holly Martins, played by Joseph Cotton. A writer of pop westerns, Martins is a stranger in a strange land in the morally complex, war-scarred world of late 1940s Vienna. He's a man who never had to fight for his own survival, who's dropped into a city where everyone he meets had to fight for their lives in the recent past. Wells's Harry Lime is the villain as a charmer. When we first see him lit in an alley by the sudden light from an upstairs apartment, his smile to Holly is wry, slightly apologetic, and deeply amused. We, the audience, understand instantly why people love and defend Harry Lime. He's one of the most likeable monsters in cinema, right up to a point where Trevor Howard's Major Calloway takes Holly to a hospital and shows him the horrors that Lime's adulterated penicillin has wreaked on children. From then on, we lose the love we have for Harry Lime. We realise what he is, and when he ultimately meets his fate in the sewers under Vienna, we're on board with that. There are a lot of dummies in 1940 cinema, but none of them is as literal as the malevolent ventriloquist dummy Hugo in the 1945 anthology horror movie Dead of Night. Directed in an abstract artistic way by Alberto Cavalcanti, the final story in this portmanteau movie is the reason why ventriloquist dummies became scary to movie audiences. Long before Anthony Hopkins fell victim to a mannequin called Corky in 1978's Magic, Dead of Night had Michael Redgrave's Maxwell Freer and his dummy Hugo. Hugo is amoral, foul-mouthed, and determined to destroy Freer's career and his mental health. He's a subtler grandfather of Child Plays Chucky, and he's 100 times scarier. Redgrave's acting sells the innately silly concept, helped enormously by Cavalcanti's use of Dutch angles and atmospheric lighting. The segment of the film ends with a haunting twist that plays as well today as it did in 1945. Obsession with the dead is always creepy. Whether it's the idolising of a dead celebrity or prolonged and unmanaged grief, this behaviour is a creepy reminder that wounds don't heal if we keep picking at the scabs. Mrs. Danvers, the housekeeper in Rebecca, the Alfred Hitchcock adaptation of Daphne du Maurier's novel, is the poster woman for unacknowledged love and insane grief. Played with a cold brilliance by Australian actor Dame Judith Anderson, Mrs. Danvers never blinks, giving her an automatic icy inhumanity. She's a nightmare for Joan Fontaine's character, the second Mrs. De Winter, who is never given a name. Mrs. Danvers' eerie, crypto-lesbian adoration of Rebecca gives her a hatred for the second Mrs. De Winter. She gaslights the woman, she convinces her to wear the same dress Rebecca wore to a fancy dress ball before her death, and she tries to get her to jump out of a window and commit suicide. Mrs. Danvers rationalises her hatred of the second Mrs. De Winter by believing that the ghost of Rebecca roams the vast country mansion Mandalay where they live. When the truth about the circumstances of Rebecca's death and of her character are revealed, Mrs. Danvers can't deal with it and burns that shit down. Richard Widmark had a long career as a character actor. In real life, from all accounts, he was a nice guy who supported left-wing causes, but in his first movie, Kiss of Death, he played a totally insane and narcissistic gangster called Tommy Udo. Tommy Udo is the thematic grandfather of later mad gangsters like Ben Kingsley's Don Logan in Sexy Beast, or even Heath Ledger's Joker. He has a very Joker vibe. He's psychotic, narcissistic, and deeply dangerous. He doesn't react as other people do. He gets on this list for one of the most iconic scenes of 1940s noir. Udo ties up an old lady in a wheelchair, a person played by Mildred Dunnock, and throws her down a flight of stairs. For 1947, this is some hardcore stuff. Femme fatales are the bread and butter of film noir. They overturn the traditional roles of women in the worst possible way by becoming better criminals than the men are. Often they're the sexual aggressors, they're smarter than the guys around them, and they're more ruthless and remorseless. Phyllis Dietrichson, played by Barbara Stanwyck, is the first of three femme fatales in this list. In Double Indemnity, she manipulates insurance salesman Walter Neff, played by Fred McMurray, into writing a double indemnity insurance policy for her husband without his knowledge. Using sex as both a whip and a leash, she convinces Neff to kill her husband and make it look like an accident so they can make the insurance claim. Not only that, she has a guy called Nino on the side who she's going to get to kill Neff to tie up the loose ends of the murder. That's some high-level evil multitasking right there. This being a 1940s movie, things don't end well for Phyllis or Walter. But Nino benefits from Neff's guilty conscience and escapes before he does something that's film noir stupid. After playing the presumed dead victim of an obsessed murderer in Laura, Gene Tierney jumped the fence a year later to bring us one of the most complex and narcissistically evil women in 1940 cinema. In Leave Her to Heaven, she plays Ellen Barrett Harlan, who marries an outdoorsy novelist called Richard Harlan, played by Cornell Wilde. Ellen was previously engaged to a Boston lawyer, Russell Quinton, played by Vincent Price, and leaves him for Harlan. You know when Vincent Price gets jilted in a movie, things are going to get ugly later on. What Harlan doesn't know is that Ellen is jealous at a level not previously seen in movies. She's as dangerous as an amphetamine-addicted honey badger. When Richard's disabled brother Danny, played by Darrell Hickman, who has polio, comes to live with them in their cabin on the lake, Ellen is automatically jealous. She takes Danny out on a rowboat for his therapeutic swim and lets him drown. That's just the start of it. Ellen finds out that she's pregnant and gets jealous of the fetus, who will take some of Richard's attention away from her. So she arranges to fall down a flight of stairs for an architecturally assisted abortion. Not being entirely stupid, Richard soon figures out that she's complicit in both the end of her pregnancy and the death of his brother. He confronts her with the evidence and she confesses, and he leaves her. That's still not the worst of it. She becomes jealous of her adoptive sister Ruth, played by Jean Crane, who is friendly with Richard. And so she poisons herself to frame Ruth for the murder. That is a Chernobyl level of jealousy. Of course, the prosecuting attorney is Vincent Price, which is never a good thing. Things do work out in the end because it's the 1940s in Hollywood. But Ellen Harland is a unique movie villain. The fact that Jean Tierney was so beautiful and that the film is shot in colour-saturated Technicolor and not noirish black and white only enhances the darkness in the heart of this character. Margot Shelby is one of the most hardcore, nasty femme fatales in movie history, and only film noir tragics like me know about her. There are a few reasons why the movie isn't very well known. Firstly, Decoy was a low-budget indie movie. Secondly, Jean Gillie didn't go on to have a long career. She died at the age of 33 of pneumonia. But she did leave us with a vivid, utterly relentless character in this hidden gem of a film. She uses her sexuality like a baseball bat, manipulating a doctor, her gangster boyfriend, her boyfriend's henchman, and a cop called Joe Portugal, played stylishly by Sheldon Leonard. Margot is unlike anyone else in 40s cinema. The character came from a background of poverty, and her sole motivation in life is to get as much money as possible as quickly as possible. Nothing and nobody else matters to her. That makes her one of the most focused villains in this list. Even on her deathbed, she's psyching out Joe Portugal in a scene that you have to see to believe.
Jojo, please. Just this once. Come down to my level.
One thing film noir teaches us is that men are idiots when they fall in lust. The sole exception to this is Humphrey Bogart's Sam Spade in John Huston's The Maltese Falcon. He instantly sees through Brigid O'Shaughnessy's helpless woman act, but she does it so well he's fascinated by her. She's a much subtler version of Margot Shelby in Decoy. All that matters is the treasure, and men are tools she uses to dig it up. Along with Peter Lorre's Joel Cairo and Sidney Greenstreet's ebullient Caspar Gutman, Brigid is addicted to the chase for the Maltese Falcon, a gem-encrusted bird that they've all been hunting for years. She's not as jovially brutal as Gutman, or as fox-cunning as Cairo, so she uses what used to be called her feminine wiles to aid her in her quest. This works with Spade's dead partner Miles Archer, but not with Spade himself. Brigid's mock helplessness makes her a fascinating villain, and the petite Mary Astor is great fun to watch in this classic 1940s movie. Forget the watered-down soft drink version of this character in Disney's Aladdin. The real Jaffar, from whom Disney stole the look, manner and character, was played in the 1940s by a German expatriate actor Conrad Veidt. In this classic Arabian Nights tale, Grand Vizier Jaffar encourages Prince Ahmed, played by John Justin, to go among his people dressed as a commoner. When he does, Jaffar has him thrown in prison, where he meets a little thief called Abu, played by Sabu. Ahmed and Abu escape and flee to Basra, where Ahmed falls in love with Princess Jasmine, June Dupree. But Jaffar has other ideas. Using magic, he strikes the prince blind and turns Abu into a dog, then throws the dog overboard in the middle of the ocean. But don't worry, the dog doesn't die. This isn't John Wick. Jaffar attempts to woo Princess Jasmine, but she falls into a magical sleep until her true love returns. Jaffar's lust for Jasmine is clear, which is unusual for a children's movie. Veidt is charismatic, sexually creepy, and fascinatingly theatrical. Forget flat-nosed Voldemort, this is what an evil wizard should look like. So there are my 10 favourite 1940s movie villains. Let me know in the comments if you like this, subscribe if you did, and I'll do the 1950s villains next. Thanks for watching.